Carmen, let's talk about universal coolants. We're hearing a lot about this right now. In fact, in the passenger car market, the universal coolants have grown in popularity. Are we seeing this popularity come over to the heavy-duty market as well?
I think probably the customers that are most being targeted by universal coolant claims, or the people who are trying to promote universal coolants, are really the big fleets right now.
Yeah.
Because they want to simplify their maintenance practices.
Right.
And unfortunately, every OEM has their own coolant specification, and not all OEMs or agree on the same type of coolant.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a known.
Sure.
Okay? But in actually talking to some of the owner-operators here, they're not so much talking about universal coolants. They're actually still concerned about, can I use an extended life coolant?
Right.
So
right.
the buzz here at Mid-America is, am I using the right coolant?
Yeah.
So the education on just even what you're supposed to be using, I don't think has filtered down as much as we'd like it to,
Right.
down to that owner-operator.
Sure.
So the idea of universality, because they don't own hundreds of trucks, they
Right.
may own 3 or 4 trucks,
Right.
is a little bit different here than we would see, maybe with a very large fleet. So.
Well, let's talk about some of those issues when we deal with this whole universal coolant situation. What is it what are some of these issues we would deal with?
Well, I think the issues that you would deal with is that a customer wants to simplify their practices.
Right, right.
But the customer...
Which sounds good on the surface.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Make it easy, that's a good thing.
Right.
The problem that we get into is that if you have more than one type of OEM vehicle in your fleet,
Yeah.
and the OEM do not agree on what coolant should be in there, and
Yeah.
you have a coolant-related failure, you may be liable for that failure versus having your warranty cover it.
Yeah. Well, that's okay.
That's the big one.
That's huge because again, the engine manufacturers they have a recommendation here. It's important to follow that recommendation. There's a reason that recommendation is in place, right?
Sure, sure.
Let's talk about you kind of touched on the warranty issues here. Specifically, I mean, what are we looking at when it comes to universal coolants and the engine market?
When you look at universal coolants, I mean, what you're really looking at are products that are supposed to have a very wide application.
Right.
Some people are saying you can use it in a car, in a
Right.
light-duty truck, in a heavy-duty truck,
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work that way.
Right.
Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
So, but a customer who wants to use a universal coolant, who wants to use one coolant in all the vehicles that they have, they actually can get there, but they've got to get there in a smart way.
Yeah.
And that smart way is to, determine what the coolant, the minimum requirements are of the coolant that they need for each specific vehicle, and then try to find the best coolant out on the marketplace that meets most of the requirements.
Yeah.
Can't say all of them because you can't meet all of them with one coolant,
Right.
but you
right.
want to meet most of them.
Yeah.
And Ardello Extended Life Coolant meets the ASTM 3306 requirements and the ASTM D62 10 requirements, which is the heavy-duty requirement.
Right.
The 3306 is the light-duty automotive requirement. So
Yeah.
we meet both of those.
Yeah.
Now, do we meet the requirements of every single OEM? No. Why? Because no coolant can.
Right. Right.
So, but we are positioned to meet both light-duty and heavy-duty basic ASTM requirements. So if
Yeah.
you're going to go to one coolant,
Yeah.
one universal coolant, drain every vehicle you have and fill it with that quote-unquote universal type coolant,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then stay with that product.
Right.
Don't go mixing them, because then you mix different formulations, and we've talked about that before. What
Sure.
happens when you mix X, Y, and Z formulas? And
Exactly.
you end up with who knows what in there.
Yeah, and there are some maintenance issues here.
There are maintenance issues, because my formula, like Indello ELC, is very different than my competitor's formula.
Right.
And when you mix two formulas, you don't get the best performance out of either one.
Yeah.
So we don't want, and I can't guarantee the performance of my coolant when you've diluted it very much with somebody else's coolant. So that's why every extended life coolant on the market has a maximum dilution level of 25%.
Yeah.
And you want to stay below that dilution level because we understand our chemistry and how it works.
Sure. Let's talk about the service life when it comes to universal coolants compared to, for instance, Dello ELC. What is that comparison like?
Well, universal coolants right now are still heavily concentrated in the automotive world.
Right.
So the maximum universal life that I've seen out there in print is 150,000 miles.
Yeah.
When you compare that to Dallo ELC, we have a minimum service life of 750,000 miles.
Wow.
So
That's huge.
the service lives are very, very different.
Yeah.
So I would not recommend a coolant that has 150,000 mile
Yeah,
service life in a
right.
heavy-duty truck that you would basically be changing the coolant out once a year.
Once a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Some great information here. Carmen Noodle-Barrow, thank you so much. We do appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Nicole Fujishige, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Great to be here at Mid-America.